everyone, I'm Abby from Abby's Kitchen. Welcome back to our series, Enlightened by Intuitive Eating. In our last video, we discussed Principle 6 of Intuitive Eating, Discover the Satisfaction Factor. So if you haven't watched that video yet, go check it out and then come back to watch this one. Now, before I want to get started, I do want to flag that this content may not be for all of my viewers, so feel free to take and leave what you find valuable. And don't forget to follow the intuitive eating journey along with me through Evelyn Tribole and Alissa Rumsey's book, which I have linked below. Also, a big thank you to Alissa Rumsey, intuitive eating dietitian who reviewed this video. I'm going to be leaving some links below to her Instagram and website if you're looking for some one-on-one support. Okay, now let's get into a reader question. Dear Abby, I really want to practice intuitive eating, but I find myself naturally eating a lower carb diet. Can I still eat intuitively this way, or do I need to follow the recommended macronutrient distributions that are recommended by major health authorities? So great question. There are official guidelines for dietary macronutrients distributions. So it's recommended, for example, that you get 45 to 65% of your daily calories from carbs, 20 to 35% of your daily calories from fat, and 10 to 35% of your calories from protein. This is a general guideline based off of population research and is known as the acceptable macronutrient distribution range, or the AMDR for short. So each macronutrient, carbs, fat, protein, provides energy in the form of calories. Now, according to the AMDRs, consuming the macronutrients within the suggested ranges is associated with reduced risk of diseases while also providing enough nutrients for good health. Having said that, keep in mind that these ranges are based on the general population and needs will be different for every person. Some people, like long-distance runners, for example, are going to need much higher intakes of carbs in order to build up sufficient glycogen stores than, for example, somebody who's sitting at a desk all day. Other people may feel that they have more stable energy when they eat more protein and fat and a little less carbs. This helps explain why different people thrive on different ways of eating. Some YouTube fruitarians, for example, apparently do really well on a super high carb diet, even though we would never recommend this for the general population. While other YouTubers may thrive on a really low carb meat only diet. These may be extremes that we don't recommend to the public for a lot of reasons, but if that's what truly feels good to that particular person, then cool. Keep in mind that these AMDR ranges are pretty broad and in some cases may be more flexible than others. So for example, to be below the AMDR for protein or fat would probably have more health concerns associated with it compared to being a little bit on the low end for carbs, just given what we know about keto, for example. But when I make suggestions on these What I Eat in a Day videos, I'm speaking more to the general population who's watching, not necessarily to that unique extreme diet of a single YouTuber. Now, if you remember in my video on principle number 4, I talked about the food anthropologist. This is a non-judgmental voice that helps you make observations about your eating. If you notice that you feel better when you eat a certain way, even if it's not perfectly aligned with the AMDRs, you would be eating intuitively because you're just listening to what your body wants. However, it becomes unintuitive depending on your intention. If your intention is to manipulate your body and it feels restrictive, then this is not intuitive eating. So for example, if I tried to follow a carnivore or a fruitarian diet, I would be dying for an apple or an egg respectively. Most of us enjoy and thrive on some degree of balance, even if the macronutrient distribution is not perfect. Again, intuitive eating is all about listening to your body and finding what works best for you in a non-judgmental, non-restrictive way. If you naturally enjoy eating protein-rich or fat-rich foods, that is fine. The key is to give yourself permission to enjoy carbs if you're in the mood for them too. Now on that note, let's move on to today's video. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing principle number 7, cope with your emotions without using food. Now, if I were to pinpoint one of the biggest challenges for people on their intuitive eating journey, it would probably be learning how to deal with the trials and tribulations of life without resorting to food as their only coping mechanism. Let's be honest, not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows. As humans, we experience an array of emotions like anger, happiness, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, and so on. And experiencing these emotions is completely normal and just part of being human. We can't always change or control that. But what we can control is how we process and cope with our emotions. For most people, food has deep emotional significance. A cup of coffee may remind us of energy and the start to a great day. So much so that even my decaf cup sometimes perks me up too. A chicken pot pie may remind us of that time you spent with your grandmother, and a slice of cake may be our way to celebrate a birthday or Hallmark occasion. You may also use food as a coping mechanism. So for example, eating a pint of ice cream is a classic rom-com response to a heartbreak. Or squirting cheese spray into your mouth when you are bored on the couch. Hollywood sure knows how to portray emotions and food, because as humans, we all just naturally cope with food. The thing is, from the day we are born, we thwart our emotions with food. Think about a crying baby that just won't stop. You pop a boob or a bottle in the mouth hoping that it might shut up. As a kid, our parents or grandparents give us a popsicle to pacify us if we scrape our knee or we're bullied at school. Food is a sign of love. It's used as comfort. It's used as reward so often in our society. And in some cases, it may also seem like the only reliable friend that you have in times of sadness or loneliness. When life is really looking hard, reaching for delicious food is very common and a way to feel some type of enjoyment in a sea of hard times, even if that enjoyment is fleeting and temporary. Unfortunately, it may not be obvious to you that you're responding this way to your emotions. I mean, you may eat the bag of chips, but not realize that you're using it as an outlet. In fact, I encourage you next time you're eating to ask yourself, why am I eating this right now? In a lot of cases, it may not be because you're physically hungry, it's because you're emotionally hungry. Or maybe you're bored and you want to keep your hands busy, which is also what we call mouth hunger. Either way, one of the potential outcomes of using food in response to emotions is overeating. Interestingly, the after effect of emotional eating is, well, new emotions. I hear people say all the time, I feel guilty because I ate X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. Guilt is associated with a moral wrongdoing, and food isn't morally right or wrong. It's just food. Unless you stole the food or committed some type of crime to get it, there's nothing to feel guilty about. However, although responding to your emotions with food may lead to a minor dopamine response that feels good, research has shown that this type of behavior can actually negatively affect our emotions shortly after. So although you shouldn't feel guilty about enjoying food, if you're noticing that you're eating to cope with emotions, it may not fix the root of the problem. There are many ways that we use food to cope with our feelings, all of which have unique outcomes and lay on a continuum from satisfaction to numbing. So first is sensory gratification. As mentioned in my last video on principle number 6, food provides pleasure, and this is a good thing. Without pleasure, food would be incredibly boring and unenjoyable, and evolutionarily speaking, we wouldn't try very hard to get it. When we find satisfaction in the foods that we eat, we're much less likely to overeat. If you're choosing to eat certain foods because you enjoy them, this is natural and a normal part of eating. Next is comfort. Certain foods just bring us comfort at different times in our lives. Chicken soup is a classic sick meal for a reason. It's warm, easy, and super comforting. Curling up in a blanket on the couch and sipping hot chocolate is also so relaxing and calming. Choosing comfort foods is normal, and it's actually a part of having a really healthy relationship with food, provided that you don't feel guilty after eating or drinking it. In fact, diet culture has co-opted the idea of comfort foods to be associated with a lack of nutrition, when in fact, what brings you comfort could in fact be truly nourishing. However, it's important to note that we can abuse food as a coping mechanism if it's our only tool in our toolbox. We want to enjoy food and have it bring us comfort, but not to have it solve all of our problems. Next is distraction. Food can be used to distract us from reality or feelings that we don't want to necessarily experience. Using food this way can be harmful because it prevents us from being able to detect our body's natural emotions and signals. It also stops you from identifying the source of your feelings and really getting to the root of your needs. If you consistently turn to a bag of chips and binge watch Netflix for hours to distract you from a stressful day, it might be time to find other ways of managing your emotions. Keep in mind, we are human and these things are going to happen every now and again. But if you're finding yourself turning to food to shield your emotions on a regular basis, it's probably something that we need to address. We want to learn to be present with our food, not use it as a distraction from our life. Next is sedation. Things become concerning when we start to use food as a way to numb our feelings. Some people like to call this a food coma because it involves eating to the point where you don't notice your feelings, your hunger, or really anything anymore. You're basically on autopilot. This type of eating is very common in people who feel like their lives are out of control and use food as a way to completely mute what's going on. In severe cases, this can lead to social isolation, missing work, or feeling completely hopeless about life. Hunger and satiety cues are usually completely ignored or not noticed, and this can lead to spiraling out of control with our overeating. Next is punishment. Now, for those of you who use food as a form of sedation, this can lead to self-blame and punishing behaviors. In severe cases, some people may overeat to the point where they feel super sick in order to punish themselves. This severe form of emotional eating can be detrimental to self-esteem and result in complete self-hatred. Typically, those who punish themselves with food report no enjoyment from food whatsoever, and in fact, say that they hate food. For this type of severe eating, compassion and understanding is really important, which comes from the nurturer voice that I talked about in principle number 4. Moreover, seeking professional help from a psychologist and a dietitian may also be really helpful. Okay, now that we have an understanding of the ways people cope with food, let's dive into why people emotionally eat. A lot of people are not even aware that they're eating emotionally and just kind of brush it off as, well, it tastes good. But as an intuitive eater, if you openly accept all foods, then they're always available. This means that even if a food tastes good, you can stop at any time because it'll be available the next time that you want it. Chances are that it'll actually taste even better when you're actually hungry for it. If you're still eating after you're full, I want you to ask yourself, if my body feels satisfied after eating a certain amount of food, but I still continue to eat after I'm full, what other need am I trying to resolve with this food? You may realize that you're using food to address some other major feelings. So let's go over some of the major ones. First is boredom and procrastination. This is probably one of the most common reasons for eating. So for example, you might be watching your daily soaps and turn to a snack. Or maybe you're waiting for a friend to kind of pick you up and you're snacking on candy while you wait. In these cases, you're not eating because you're hungry, but rather because you're entertaining yourself with food. Next is bribery and reward. Throughout our lives, we've probably used food as a reward or even as a bribe to get somebody to do something. For example, you may tell your kids that they can pick out a chocolate bar if they behave while you shop. Or maybe you reward yourself with a donut for doing a really hard workout. While there is nothing wrong with enjoying foods in good times, using food as a reward can actually be self-perpetuating. There are always going to be things in your life to reward yourself for, and there will always be times when your kids need to behave. Trust me. Using food as the solution creates an expectation that food will always be the reward or bribe for certain good behaviors. Next is excitement. One of the reasons that people like to go on diets is because they can trigger feelings of excitement and hope. This diet is going to be the one. It's that newness that really excites people and motivates them to get started doing something that, let's be real, they don't actually really want to do. Over time, we do tend to get bored of the same old food, same old life, and want to just inherently mix things up. Problem is, using food as a way to add excitement to your life usually leads to feelings of despair. When that diet stops working, that excitement turns to upset and leads you to use food again in order to cope. Then you try a new diet, it's exciting at first, stops working, you cope. As you can see, this creates a bit of a cycle that is really hard to break. Next is soothing. So using candy as a way to add sweetness to your life is a temporary fix to a much larger problem. Although food, of course, can bring out really good feelings, if you're finding yourself constantly using eating to incite relaxation or happiness, this can evolve into a poor relationship with food. Next is love, anger, and stress. Food can be used as a way to express love. So, for example, making a meal for your partner can be a way to show them that you appreciate them and that you care about them. It can also be a way to express anger. So, for example, turning to really crunchy chips to physically chomp down on something is commonly used as a way to relieve anger, or just to annoy your husband like I often do. Anyways, finally, food can be used or not used to deal with stress. During acute stress, there is a rush of adrenaline known as the fight or flight response, which was designed to help us run away from threats. This occurs more with acute stress, meaning that it is temporary. Problem is, the stress that we experience tends to be chronic stress, which raises our cortisol levels and can lead to extra storage of abdominal fat. If you compound this with stress eating, this often leads people into overeating and to the idea of blowing your diet, which in itself causes stress that perpetuates the cycle. Next is a sense of connection. Whether you belong to a religious group, sports team, or other organization, feeling a part of a group is a really important part of human survival. If going out for wings after a game is a routine for your sports team, you may feel inclined to eat even if you're not really hungry. Instead of feeling like a Diet Debbie that everyone is gonna nag, you may just eat anyway and feel dissatisfied, or just really uncomfortably full. This is really common for people who want to bond with others, but struggle to find a way to manage social eating situations and their actual unique needs. All right, so now that we have an idea of how and why people emotionally eat, how can you cope with your emotions without using food? Well, the first thing that I want you to try is to ask yourself 4 important questions in a 4-step process. Am I actually hungry? If yes, then by all means, honor your hunger and eat. If not, then answer the next question. What am I feeling? If you're not biologically hungry, then what are you hungry for? What are you feeling? For most people, this isn't something that's really easy to pinpoint, so I would suggest trying one of the following. Use a journal and write out your feelings and emotions. Chat with a friend to vent. Sit in a quiet room and let yourself experience these feelings. You might be really surprised how much this can help. Or seek out some professional help from a counselor or psychologist. Once you've determined this, you can move on to the next question. And that is, what do I need? In a lot of cases, people eat to fulfill an unmet need. So for example, you might find yourself turning to candy and sweets after work every day, even if you're not actually hungry. After diving into how you're feeling, you might notice that you feel burnt out and really tired. Instead of food, what you likely need is some rest and sleep. So to solve this problem, focusing on sleep hygiene may be a good first step. To do this, it's time to move to step 4, and that may mean asking for a little bit of support. If you notice that you're really burnt out, finding time for yourself may be really hard to do, but is so essential to breaking the cycle of emotional eating. Whether it's your boss or your partner, asking for time for yourself may be really helpful. For example, ask your boss for a personal day, or ask your partner to watch the kids for 45 minutes while you take a bath or go to a yoga class. Uninterrupted time to yourself may help meet your actual needs for relaxation and also help you realize that food was not the solution to your problem in the first place. There are many ways that people can meet their needs without food, and this will ultimately be very different for each individual person. But with that being said, there are some basic needs that almost everyone needs that do not involve food. And that is rest, sensual pleasure, ability to express oneself and feelings, being heard, understood, and accepted, being stimulated both intellectually and creatively, and comfort and warmth. If these needs are not met, you may turn to food in order to cope. And while it may be easy for some, it can be really hard for a lot of other people just to meet these basic needs. Evelyn Tribole and Alissa Rumsey give some really great suggestions for dealing with your feelings in their book. 1, write in a journal and express your true feelings. 2, talk to a friend on the phone or in person. If you're like me, you may want to maybe talk to a few. Record yourself on your phone. This may actually be really helpful if no one is available at the moment so that you can have a bit of a conversation with yourself to kind of hash things out. 4, physically express your feelings in a safe way, like maybe punching a bag or a pillow. Confront the person who is upsetting you if you're feeling safe to do so. Cry as much as you want. I mean, it is very natural and it is a healthy way to deal with grief, anger, sadness, etc. Sit and let yourself discover your feelings and emotions. Seek out professional help. This is actually not a last resort and is actually something that I recommend everybody try to access if they can. And finally, engage in some acts of self-care. So some popular acts of self-care that you can utilize in your journey include meditation, reading a book, relaxing on the couch, taking a sauna or a hot tub if you can, listening to music, playing games with friends, family, or a pet, taking a relaxing bath, getting a massage, going for a walk or some other form of physical activity, and asking someone for a hug. The human hug is one of the most profound but helpful ways to cope. It actually releases a cascade of feel-good chemicals that can be calming, relaxing, and provide support. If you don't have someone to hug at the moment, even hugging a stuffed animal or a real animal can be really helpful. My personal outlet is exercise. I know, such a dietitian thing to say. But I'm not talking about doing like a CrossFit session or sprinting on the treadmill for 90 minutes. No, thank you. Even just going for a walk with my toddler or my husband can absolutely help. Research has found that exercise and other healthy coping mechanisms can be a really effective way to manage stress and emotional eating. So exercise in particular provides a healthy distraction from your stress while also providing a boost of endorphins and an outlet that can ultimately help to relieve stress. As you navigate this principle, I want to emphasize that you may deal with some discomfort for a while. After a lifetime of using food to cope with your emotions, it may be really overwhelming to experience your emotions and your feelings up close. It's actually completely okay to enjoy food's flavors and the feelings that we get from it. This is healthy. But we really want to get away from using these experiences to fill a void or cover up underlying problems that you're facing. As I've said throughout this series, intuitive eating is not a straight road. You are going to have times when you eat emotionally, and that is perfectly fine. The goal is to identify emotional eating and navigate the reason behind it. In some ways, having this setback may actually help you realize how far you've really come. You may notice that you find it easier to identify the reasons for your emotional eating and find appropriate outlets. It may also be a clue that you need to reassess your current life situation. If you're eating because you're angry, look into what is causing that anger. If you're eating because you're tired or bored, what can you do to solve that? By being the food anthropologist, you can start to identify trends in your behavior and begin to connect them to situations in your real life. So instead of feeling out of control, appreciate that you've developed the skills to do this and identify the problem early before it gets completely out of control. As you continue through your intuitive eating journey, remember that food is something that we should all enjoy and use to nourish our body and our mind. Your relationship with food will become so much stronger when you use food for a pleasurable experience rather than just as a way to cope. So for this week, I want you to identify the reasons for your emotional eating. Using the 4 steps or questions can be really super helpful. Am I actually hungry? What am I feeling? What do I need? And can I have some support? In addition to this, I want you to find at least one non-food coping mechanism that feels good to you. So for example, see if exercise helps to relieve your stress, or maybe you like dealing with stress by reading a book. Whatever it is, find something that you genuinely find relaxing. If you reach for food, try doing this first. If you're still wanting food after this, then assess whether you're eating emotionally or if you're actually hungry. Again, this may take time to learn how to do, but over time, you'll have a much easier experience identifying the reasons behind your food choices. And I want to, of course, flag that it is absolutely okay to be eating for emotional reasons. The key is to identify these reasons, to be accepting of them, to be compassionate with yourself, and to move on. And to not let those food choices inform the rest of your day, the rest of your week, the rest of your month, and your general affect. So continue to work on all of these steps throughout your intuitive eating journey, and stay tuned for our next video on principle number 8, respect your body. All right, folks, that's all for today. Don't forget to give this video the thumbs up. Leave me a comment below if you have any questions about intuitive eating. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.